Welcome back to the GSMC Sports Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Sports Network. Going into our final segment here today, we've talked about some NFL head coaching stuff. We've talked about the Cowboys, just wrapped up some NBA talks. Now we are going to be getting into a little bit of college basketball here, as February marks the last full month of the regular season. So I'm going to start off the segment just talking about the current top three teams in the country. Now, one of these teams is likely to be out of the top three by the end of the week and the next poll comes out, but still a blue blood in that sense, and we're going to just sort of whip around here in college basketball talk, starting off with the number one team in the nation, the defending champs from last year in UConn. They have been really unbelievable this year and haven't seen too much of a drop-off from last year. Now, I know that last season they were even hotter coming out of the gates in the start of the season, but still just such a complete team. And yeah, they lost a couple guys to the NBA. Jordan Hawkins, their shooter, who was big for them in the tournament, they lose him. Andre Jackson Jr., who we just talked about on the Bucks, the very good defender, he's gone. And yet this team still remains just so efficient on both sides of the ball. They're a top 3 offense, a top 25 defense, and they have just so many players, led by Tristan Newton, the 5th-year guard for them. He really runs the keys of the offense for them in just such an efficient system. He is in the top 20 for the Wooden Award winners, and he has just been really impressive to me. Not necessarily an NBA draft guy, partially due to his age, partially due to his size, but I just think such a good decision maker, a talented scorer. He does everything right for them, and he's just been the leader of this team. This team has a little bit of young talent as well. They have 2 likely first-round picks in the upcoming NBA draft between Stephen Castle and Donovan Clingan. Castle is a freshman guard. He was one of the top recruits coming into the season. Now, he was dealing with a knee injury early in the year after the first couple games that sidelined him for a few weeks. And once he came back, he was coming off the bench. He was struggling with his efficiency a little bit, but since then he has really been coming around more and more as the weeks go on. I have really been a fan of watching him play. He just scored 20 points on 50% shooting last night in their matchup against a very physical Providence team. Grabbed 3 offensive rebounds in that win as well. He's a high motor guy. He's very athletic. He has good instincts. He's a good decision maker off of drives. He gives you a lot of what you would want from your starting guard at the college basketball level, and then even going on to the NBA level. I think that he projects to be a good, solid player for whatever team he ends up on. The other big guy, and I mean big guy, is Donovan Clingan, who could also see his way to a first-round pick, potentially even a lottery pick. The 7'2" frame, he has stepped in to fill this void that UConn lost after losing their all-conference big man, Adama Sanogo, last season. And you could see last season, Clingan coming off the bench and having an impact with his enormous frame, and it was just a matter of there maybe wasn't necessarily the room for him at the time to fully step into that full starter role with Sanogo there. But in turn, it ended up being a nasty 1-2 conversation. They had just as much size as anybody in the country last year, and I think that Clingan has really put together a solid season. Now, he's another guy, been dealing with a little bit of lower body issues, which, if you're an NBA fan, may be a little bit of a concern as far as projecting to the next level, but the talent is absolutely there. He has great instincts coming off of the pick and roll game, doesn't have too much of a perimeter shot, We'll see if he is ever able to really develop that. I don't think that he's the best perimeter defender necessarily, but he is just a mauler inside. He is extremely hard to guard. He is a disruptor in the paint defensively. So I think that he gives a ton of value to this UConn team that, coming off of last year, was able to win the national championship with not exactly the same player, but with a similar dominant big sort of leading the way, along with another year of Tristan Newton. There are other starters as well. Alex Caravan and Cam Spencer are other really good scorers that help play into this strong offensive situation. Fun fact, I actually got to watch Alex Caravan live when I was in high school. He knocked my high school out of the Division I playoffs my senior year, and now I see him playing for UConn. It's pretty special. He's a very good player as well. Could actually end up getting a contract at the next level as well. He's just a sophomore currently. But moving on to number 2, Purdue, who last night had a little bit of a scare against Northwestern. Northwestern actually handed them their first loss of the season earlier this year. That game took place in Northwestern. This one in Purdue. They still came out and put up an overtime fight. They have now gone to overtime in both of these meetings. So I think that Northwestern is actually, I know this is a Purdue segment here, but Northwestern is a very good basketball team as well. If you have not had the chance to look into Boo Buie, great name, even better basketball player. He is a killer for Northwestern, and if Northwestern makes the tournament, which I think that they probably are on pace to do so this season, he could definitely be a catalyst for at least one upset win. They've played a little bit of a spoiler role this season as a whole. I like watching them, but on Purdue here, you can't talk about Purdue without talking about big man 7'4" Zach Edey. He is the favorite to win the Wooden Award, the most valuable college player award for those who don't know. But he's on pace to win that award for the second year in a row with another dominant season. I mean, this guy is just a monster. He really is unfair. 7'4", 7'11" wingspan, so just about the size of Victor Wembanyama, and this is at the college basketball level. He's just an unguardable force in the interior, gets a ton of foul calls because really there's not much else you can do. And I mean, last night, again, this game between Northwestern and Purdue was filled with storylines and some drama. It was very entertaining, but free throw discrepancy was just unbelievable in that one. And, you know, you can make different arguments for it. The numbers I don't have right in front of me. Obviously, when you have Zach Edey on your team, you're going to get a lot of free throws, but it was somewhere along the lines of 30 plus to like 7 in terms of free throw discrepancy in favor of Purdue. So, wild game. But that's also what Zach Edey just brings to the table because he's pretty much unguardable, just playing straight up. Around Zach Edey, I think that they have a more mature and more talented team than they have in the past. This is a Purdue program that has been on a little bit of, I don't know, fraud watch is maybe a little unfair, but a tough stretch in the tournament the past few seasons. But Braden Smith, their point guard, he has elevated his game to another level this year. He was masterful in the game last night with 16 assists. Can score as well, but that's just the thing, is he's elevated everything this year. He is up in points, rebounds, assists, steals, and shooting percentages. So he's been a great player for them. He is currently 6th in the country, at least as of last night, in assists per game with 7. Lance Jones, one of their other guards and perimeter guys, is a tremendous defender himself. Fletcher Lawyer, where we saw last night what happens is you give so much attention to Edey on the outside, Purdue actually has guys on the perimeter that can hurt you if you leave them open. That's what Northwestern lost last night, as Fletcher Lawyer had a huge 3 in overtime to help push them over in that win. He's been super efficient on the offensive side, and especially past the three-point line, almost 10 percentage points better this season in comparison to last year. And just on the note of Purdue, because again, Fraud Watch is probably unfair, they are a very good program. They're a very good team this year, and they have been even in these years past, but they are now going on 3 straight seasons with losing to a double-digit seed in the tournament. Last year, most notably, losing the 1-16 matchup to Fairleigh Dickinson in the opening round. The year before that, they lost to the number 15 seeded St. Peter's, lugged by Doug Eater, that went on that electric run towards the Elite Eight. They lost that game in the Sweet 16, obviously. And then they lost to North Texas, which was the 13 seed in the round of 64 in 2021. So a handful of bad losses piling up for them. And I think that in the past it's been very one-dimensional with Edey. I think that they're more talented along the edges. Now, that's not to say that I would have them as my pick come March Madness. We'll have to see. Last year, going into the tournament, their defensive numbers were very much not good, which is why I think that when it comes to defense, a lot of these times, like, you see the way that these college teams, to some degree, are sort of mimicking the pros. It's a lot of drive and kick, shooting a lot of threes, and they do have at least Edey in the middle, but I think that just defense is so invaluable in college basketball, because in these big moments, it's very easy for these young kids to freeze up a little bit. You need to be able to get stops, and you can't just rely on scoring every single game, which is a lesson for a team we are going to briefly be getting to. But first, hitting on North Carolina, currently the number 3 team in the country, but they just suffered an upset loss to Georgia Tech the other night, and this was another example of kind of some of the madness that's been going on in college basketball this year. Top 10 teams are sub 500 record-wise on the road against unranked teams this season. That is a crazy mark. Matt Norlander of CBS did an article on this in his court report, so check that out. He has a lot of good stuff, but he wrote this article that came out Tuesday afternoon around noon, and at the time, top 10 teams on the road against unranked teams won just 44.9% of matchups. And then since then, we had UNC losing to Georgia Tech. We did have Marquette beating Villanova, but those are the 2 games, 1-1, still would be under 500. Top 10 teams on the road against unranked opponents have won 73% of matchups all time, and the lowest single season winning percentage came in the 2015-16 season, where they won 62% of the time. They're not even winning 50% of the time right now, which just goes to show the level of parity that there is in this sport. You can also choose to make the argument that it is about the polls not being quite as precise, but I think that it does have to do with the lack of that many dominant teams in the league. But talking about UNC quick, very good on defense. They have Armando Bacot, the big man in the middle, that is a game wrecker. RJ Davis, in my opinion, is the best guard in the country. He is incredible, averaging 21.5 points per game, which is good for 8th in Division I going into last night. Harrison Ingram could potentially be an NBA player himself, the wing. He is a junior. So that is UNC. I don't quite have as much time to get into the rest of the teams that I wanted to cover, But I do have a little bit of time here to talk about the Kentucky Wildcats, who are number 10, but they are also set to drop down in the rankings because last night they just lost at home to Florida in overtime, which was a very good game. But they are who I was talking about in terms of you can't just rely on your offense. They are very bad defensively, and it shows last night. The score was in the 90s. That's just what happens with this Kentucky team. But I wanted to highlight them because if you are an NBA fan that's looking to get into college basketball, I think that Kentucky, they have the most NBA talent. They are extremely entertaining because of the fact that they don't play defense, but because their offense is also so good as well. They came into the year with a number of very impressive freshman talents. DJ Wagner and Justin Edwards were expected to be the two main guys for them, but it has actually sort of shifted to a couple of their bench scorers. Rob Dillingham is a fascinating player to watch with his array of different offensive skills. He is a straight bucket, and he is so much fun to watch. I also think that Reed Shepherd, their shooter off of the bench, is really impressive. He's actually sneakily good at the off-ball defense, getting deflections, steals, all that type of stuff, and he has a flamethrower for a three-point shot. I think that, yes, he is a smaller frame guy, but could definitely be a role player on an NBA team, which is sort of what this draft consists of, is a lot of role player caliber players. Tons of other names there. Aaron Bradshaw, they just got the big man, Big Z Avicic, who was struggling with eligibility with the NCAA for a lot of the year, but was just granted it a couple of weeks ago, and he's had a very solid start to his career. Antonio Reeves, a little bit of an older guy there, has been good for them, as has Trey Mitchell. But that is all we have time for today. Thank you very much for tuning in to the GSMC Sports Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Sports Network. Just remember to like and follow. It helps us out a lot. And we will be back on this show at 2 o'clock tomorrow. So tune in then. Thank you again for watching.